Secretary, welcome.
Thank you.
Admit it, you thought Michael Thurman was going to name you as his favorite politician from opposing party lines.
Well, hope springs eternal.
Well, let's start here. For part of your 2-minute intro, why do you think you're the Republican who can win this race?
Well, I'm running for governor to make sure that Georgia is affordable and safe for our communities. You know, I've been traveling all over the state for several years now, and when I do, I'm hearing this constant concern. People are worried about that they don't have enough money to make it to the end of the month. People are worried about their jobs. In fact, when I was down in the Hendry County office, this lady, her wages have gone up several times, gotten $2 an hour raises, but she says it's just not enough anymore. And so she's looking about getting a second job. Then yesterday I was out at a major hardware store, and I saw this fellow, lived in our city. It turns out that he had been working in marketing for 25 to 30 years. He lost his job, now he's working there. And just, you think about how he's going to make ends meet. So people are concerned about that. People are also concerned about their communities. They want to make sure they have safe streets and safe schools. And I think that's really important. So I'll continue to work on those, as your next governor. I've been a business owner, created a business, created hundreds of jobs. So I know how to do this. What we have to do is focus in on, as we restore manufacturing back to America, make sure that we get more than our fair share.
Another politician who didn't take their full 2 minutes. I like it. More time for my questions. What did last night's Public Service Commission races, the thumping that Democrats delivered on Republicans, what message did that send to Republicans? Is this a one-off or is this an alarm bell?
Actually, it shows that I'm on target because it's affordability. It was a referendum on affordability. We need to address that. And the best way, really, I feel, of addressing affordability, number one, is creating great paying jobs. Great paying jobs solves a lot of issues, a lot of problems for folks. But the other thing is, what I've noticed is everyone's property taxes keep on going up. Social Security is going to be 2.8% higher next year. And yet, because home prices have gone up so much, your property tax bill could go up 7%, 15%, things like that. We need an immediate property tax cap for seniors.
So there's a broader debate about tax cuts in the Republican Party, income tax, property tax. You're obviously on team property tax. But how do you fund that? How do you fund whatever taxes end up getting cut, along with your pledge, or at least your campaign's pledge? I don't know if you've signed the Grover Norquist anti-tax pledge quite yet, but your campaign has said you will. How do you not raise taxes but still cut other taxes and maintain the level of service that Georgians are used to?
I've never voted for a tax increase in my life, and I never will, because there's always money there. Because as a business owner, we've gone through good times and we've also gone through some really tough times. Construction goes up and it goes down. It goes down. You're just hanging on for dear life. Not taking salary for a couple years, maybe having to trim people, and it's just really a tough time. And that's what I'm seeing right now. The inflation that we kind of had back in the 80s, and now we're seeing it coming back. 40-year high of inflation, and it's really devastated families. But at the end of the day, if Social Security is going up 2.8%, and the average inflation is, say, 3%, 4%, but property taxes are going up 15%, there's an awful lot of money there. We need to cap property taxes for seniors. They have the money.
So we've talked a little about affordability. Trump came up very, very high in all of our polls of issues that Georgians are most closely watching ahead of the next year's midterms. At President Trump's urging just a few days ago, the Justice Department requested election records from back in 2020. It feels like the battle over his defeat 5 years ago is still raging in your party, if not helping to shape at least some of these midterm campaigns. Why is this still the gravitational pull inside your party, and what does it say about where the GOP is headed in Georgia?
What I do know is that we have the most secure elections, the safest elections in the entire country. In fact, don't take my word for it, UJ did a poll. Over 92% of all Georgians, that's 92% of all of you, trust our election process. Why is that? Because we do robust citizenship checks. We have photo ID for all forms of voting, doesn't matter how you vote. And we make sure that lines are shorter than 1 hour on election day. And I think this is great. Those results were reported 1 hour after the polls closed. Safest election in the entire country. But, like I said, don't take my word for it. What about Fox News? On election night in the fall, Jonathan Turley said Georgia and Florida run the best election in the entire country. Who are we to argue?
So, I get that, but why do you think some in your party, including the president, whose agenda and policies you support, are still fixated on the 2020 election in Georgia?
I've done everything I can, and everything that we've done has improved the election process. We have the most secure elections. And people at the end of the day have to realize that voters have issues. Number one issue that voters have right now is affordability. And we need to get serious about it. I think you need someone that knows how to build, and create jobs. And that's what I did in my own business, created hundreds of jobs. I had a manufacturing plant down in Columbus, Georgia, and then we expanded with another manufacturing plant up in Forsyth County, creating jobs for Georgians, good paying jobs, people that, ended up doubling their salaries the years that they were with us. And that's a good thing because they were doing more, they were creating more value for our company, but creating value for themselves. And so we want to make sure that we create great paying jobs. That's what it gets down to, is the big issues of affordability, but also it gets down to public safety. That's another issue. You go out there and talk to folks. They're concerned about what's happening in school. They're also concerned about what's happening in their community. We need to make sure that our police force is fully funded and well-trained. I come from Johns Creek. We always made sure that our officers were well compensated. It's a tough job out there. It's very dangerous. We want to make sure they're well compensated and also have state-of-the-art training. Governor Kemp had school safety grants. We want to make sure we continue those because we want to make sure we have safe schools. Those are the key issues, and I think that's what we need to be focused in on.
Secretary, we've talked about this a lot over the years, but now we're joined by a few hundred of our friends and thousands more watching and listening online. So walk our audience through it. You and your family, you suffered personal threats and backlash from President Trump and his allies when you refused his demand to overturn the election 5 or so years ago. Yet you still support the president and his policies. So is there a moment or an action where you think Republicans should say, this crosses the line when it comes to what the president's doing?
Well, if you want to go back in time, what I would just say, what it did show is no matter what, I'll do the right thing. No matter what, I'll stand for Georgia. Other people haven't maybe been put to that test, but we were. At the end of the day, this is too important. Our job when we hold elected office is to do our job, and that's what I'll continue to do. But also understand the issues that people are facing. And the big issues, like I said, is affordability. President Trump, since you brought him up, he wants to bring manufacturing back to America. My, a whole idea on that is I just like it to stop here in Georgia. Because when we have manufacturing comes back to America with advanced manufacturing, health sciences, things like that, those are great paying jobs. We have 3 paper mills that have already shut down. One in Blakely, Georgia. Over 200 people in that mill in Blakely, Georgia, population about 20,000. We're making over $100,000 a year. I submit to you that $100,000 a year in Blakely, Georgia is a great paying job, not just a good paying job. Those are the kind of jobs we want to make sure we bring back to America and bring back to Georgia, because when we do that, we can really make a difference in people's lives.
I'm going to steal a question from my colleague Tia Mitchell, but ask it with a GOP twist. What do you consider yourself? Are you a conservative? Are you a moderate? Are you mainstream? Are you establishment? How do you define yourself and your brand of politics?
I was a born conservative. Nothing's changed. I just always believe in really the ability for us to get out there. We need a good education, and we got to work hard. In fact, when I was down there in Columbus today, it was really exciting to see their Associated Building Contract, or the AJC, General Contractors Association, was working with local schools. And there was a contest there with all these kids working on trades. And every one of them are going to have great paying jobs when they get out of school. Plumbers are making $35 an hour. It was on the board. It was great to see that. Electricians, $32.50. Then they had the stonemasons and they had the framers, all these different people, and they get trained. And Brassfield and Gorey, all these other general contractors around there, looking at assessing the talent, giving them grades, but also recruiting them as they came out of high school. So I think those are the most important things, is making sure we have a skilled, ready workforce for great paying jobs.
Let's talk about the third big issue, healthcare. If you're elected, you're going to have to deal with federal cuts to Medicaid and other programs for some of Georgia's neediest residents under the president's tax and spending package, the big, beautiful bill, which you support. How should the state grapple with those funding losses over your first term if you're elected?
I think it's pulling people together and having those conversations. I had a conversation with someone involved with a hospital. I want to make sure we work and talk to all the stakeholders. But what I've noticed is, like up in Gainesville, they had a private free market solution. It was a charity clinic where doctors donated their time. Then there's also the Highlands Clinic that's in several regions up in North Georgia also. We look at that model, but also how do we make sure that we secure not just rural health care, but also health care in the urban areas. Those are the two areas that are most at risk. And so I'll be working across the aisle. I'm working with other folks to make sure that we can have a productive solution that works for everyone.
Should Georgia fund food stamp benefits during the shutdown by dipping into its the state surplus, as some Democrats and even some Republicans have pushed for?
I think at the end of the day, what we need to have happen is they need to get back to work. In fact, right now, they've already cut 10% of the flights. And when they now start cutting, what's next, 20% of the flights? You know, we need people to get back to work. We need them to get paid. And so that would solve all of these issues, and they can do that tomorrow.
Would you, I know it's a federal issue. Mm-hmm.
No one should be holding the American people hostage based on some political difference. Get back to work. If you have some differences, work those out later. But right now, people are hurting.
But later, should Congress fund those health care subsidies that could see Georgians paying thousands of dollars more a year for health care benefits?
I'm running for governor, and I'm focused on what I can do as governor to make sure we create great paying jobs for Georgians, have public, safety, safe communities, safe schools. We do that and make sure we have an education system, not just for today, but also for tomorrow. That's really important. And I think that really gets down to, I'm an engineer. I think engineering is a great business, but I know not everyone's going to go to college. Not everyone wants to do what I've done. That's fine. There's such diversity in what we want to do. People all have their innate strengths and interests. But I want to make sure we have an education system that works. We have accountability there, and that we reward teachers when we have great outcomes. We want to make sure that the students can pass their English proficiency test in the 3rd grade, 4th grade, so we can pass them on. That is really one of the building blocks, is really reading, and then obviously math skills, the ABCs.
Secretary, let's head to the lightning round. I won't call it rapid fire. Favorite living politician?
That's a good question.
Use
I'd
the
have to,
microphone.
I hadn't thought about that one. My favorite living politician would be, I guess, Brian P. Kemp, because I think Brian Kemp has done a great job as governor.
Call or text?
I think it's best to get people on the phone. I like talking to them.
Mac or PC? Mac or PC?
I'm a PC guy. My wife's a Mac.
Got it. What is the last song you listened to?
Most people are good.
And best gift you've ever received?
Tricia.
Good answer. Secretary, thanks for joining us.
Thank you.